Hi everyone, welcome to this new episode of Carolyn Talks. I'm your host, Carolyn Hines, film critic and journalist, and this is the podcast / YouTube channel where I speak to film creatives about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm joined by writer and director Harry Brandrick to talk about his new short film, The Out, which is a film about a father who's struggling to find his way after being released from prison. And this film has some very tense moments, but I think it also has some very poignant and endearing moments as well. And we'll get into The Out. But before that, as usual, I like to ask my guests to say a bit about themselves.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So for everyone, can you tell us what made you decide to become a writer and a director and into pursuing the work of filmmaking? Because everyone's journey is never the same. No two filmmakers has the exact same journey.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I mean, I didn't come from like a creative background at all. Like I left school, like high school at like 16, didn't really have any grades, started to work in construction and various other things. And then I kind of went to university a bit later, in like my early 20s, to study photography, which is where I kind of got sort of like turned onto cinema. I had a tutor she quoted like a film by Godard, and I was just like curious. I didn't know anything about like art house or the French New Wave or anything like that. And just from that point, really, it was it became a bit of an obsession for me. You know, I don't know if you know the film Pierrot Le Fou, where Jean-Paul Belmondo looks into the camera and starts to talk to the audience. And at that point, I just like my head kind of exploded. And yeah.
I don't think I've seen it, but I think I'm getting a visual of like a clip from it where he's talking directly to audience. He for almost the entire time of the film, right? Yeah,
one of the Godard films anyway. So so from that point, I just, like I say, became kind of obsessed, started to watch all kind of different movies, you know, mostly just like on my laptop, but a lot of the time, to be honest. And then I did like an acting course as well whilst I was in my like final year of my photography course. And just started to become more and more curious, and you know, it's kind of like a rabbit hole, I suppose. But I think like quite early on, I started to have a sense that I kind of wanted to do it as well as just like be an audience member. So then when I finished my university course, I moved to Paris, where I worked as a bartender for a bit, and then I just started to have these ideas for like a short film that I wanted to do. So moved back to the UK, made this short film, and my goal was to do like a master's course in directing at the National Television and Film School here just outside of London. But I'd made this short, and then I kind of thought, well, I sort of know how to do it now, and I've already got other ideas. And so then I did like another short, which got into like a couple festivals, and then did this one, which has led me to talking to you right now.
And here we are. As I said, no one's journey is the same. So it's interesting that you started out from being a photographer. And I think for a lot of people, like it does give being a photographer, I think lends a certain eye to filmmaking, whereas we're instead of starting straight onto filmmaking, because as a photographer, you got to be more cognizant of how you frame a shot, because you only have this one split second to capture the perfect shot. Whereas for a filmmaker, you're able to like do a shot and then be like, okay, reshoot, take from a different angle. Whereas for like in still photography, for instance, you have to make sure that everything is perfect the way you want it in this shot. So like what was the transition for you from doing photography to filmmaking? Like how did being a filmmaker, what am I saying? How did being a photographer help you with discovering your, I guess you could say, your eye as a filmmaker? Yeah,
I think, you know, it's not just like all those things you said are true, like composition and framing, but also it's like storytelling, you know, like a photographer tells a story in one frame or one image, you know, and like I feel like the photographers that I kind of fell in love with, people like Nan Goldin. I mean, Nan Goldin's a huge inspiration for me, but you know, they are like, there's a lot of story actually in those images. So I think for me, having studied those photographers, it felt like, quite a natural, it didn't feel too different, to be honest. You know, it's just expanding the scope of it, I suppose, in some ways.
And can you say a bit about what your first short film was? Like, what was it about your first short film that you said, this is the story I want to tell first?
So the short film, it's about a young homeless woman, and she bumps into like an ex-boyfriend who I played. and the kind of the backstory is they haven't seen each other in like a long time. Obviously, she wasn't homeless when they were together, and it's just this kind of interaction. They kind of go for a coffee, and it's a lot about like what isn't said kind of thing. Like super simple. And I think I kind of got involved with some like housing activism here in London. Like when I was at uni, there was an estate that I kind of lived nearby where they were getting kicked out essentially by this corporation. And so yeah, I just kind of got involved with housing activism then, and just sort of had this idea of, and yeah, that was kind of on my mind. And then that was kind of the framework of it. And then just thought of what story could I tell that sort of centered around that. And yeah, so very simple. Didn't really like bother submitting it to many festivals or anything. It was more just for the curiosity and just for like wanting to make a film, really.
So the thing that always interests me with short films in particular is I think every short film that I've ever seen is usually set in one day, or like as like either it's like a full 24 hours of one day caught within a short frame, or it's maybe just a couple hours of a story being told. And you have to, like, for short films, you have to make the story so concise, but also still so deep that we get a sense of who these characters are from the beginning. And you do that with the alt, where like we don't have any introduction to these characters. We don't have like a what's the word you call it? A prologue? Is it prologue?
Backstory. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We don't have a backstory. We don't have a prologue. So we get straight into the story. We get introduced into these characters, and like even for like the story you're talking about, you have to introduce a sense of history to the characters. Like we're like they're exes, as you said. So there's as romantic exes, there is a history. And you have to be able to tell that story of like, and get a sense of like why they possibly broke up and then what led them to the points they are. Yeah. And for the we do get that, like we get a sense immediately that Liam and Jade, they're exes, of course, and they have a daughter, but just from the beginning, you can tell their relationship did not end well. They're uneasy. They have an acrimonious relationship, but they're still trying to do the best for their daughter, and we get that from basically one, like they're like Jade is only in 2 scenes in this entire film, but you get all of this sense of history in their story. So talk about the beginning, the story of the alt from there, because like you have to introduce the audience to these 3 main characters. So it's Liam, Jade, and their daughter Sophia, and we already get a sense of their entire family dynamic from just that intro alone.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. It's a balancing act. And actually, I did have too much backstory in there, and even like not even in the script, but in the edit as well. But one of the producers on the film, she kind of said, you're giving too much context, and like you say, you don't have that much time, so you kind of have to get into the story. I think those things like you say about the interactions with Jade and Liam, a lot of it actually comes down to not just the performance, it's the writing as well, but it's the actors who they give you that sense. Kimberly is very talented. She, the way she communicates with Liam, you do just get the sense. You can tell their story straight away. You don't need to be told it in any kind of like simplistic, like easy way, or like you say with like a prologue. It's just there in the emotions and in the kind of nature of that interaction, I suppose. Sorry, I forgot, what was the second part of your question?
No, I'm sorry. I just like your decision to start the story from there, because like we don't, like, for instance, like the film begins really with them right on the balcony and they're having this discussion. So like there isn't even a lead up, like there isn't really any lead up to this story. Like you see Liam getting ready, and he has the ankle bracelet. Ankle monitor, not a bracelet, people. It's not a bracelet, it's a monitor. But you from the beginning, like I think like Allan, who plays Liam, I think he does such a fantastic job even from the beginning, because he's nervous. You can tell he's nervous, he's unsure, and he's trying his best to be as good as he can be with what he has. But then Jade and Sophia comes in, and then you realize, okay, wait, so this is what you did. You don't know what he did, but you do know that whatever he did, it's his fault. Like their relationship fell apart because it's him. And he has a sense of contrition about him, where like, and I think Allan does a very good job. And the way how you direct it, you can tell he's very unsure about himself, and he's very humble. And like Alan holds his posture in a way where you can tell he's waiting for any kind of negative comment from Jade. And it's not that the comments are undeserved. You can tell that he knows that he deserves whatever she has to say, whatever admonishment she has to say. So talk about starting the story from there, especially there, and how I introduced their dynamic the way you did, because like everything about that intro scene with the three of them explains the entire film. Like that, like the entire film could be encapsulated into that one scene.
Yeah, I think for me, like good writing is, you know, where character and plot are kind of the same thing. You know, like it's sort of it's the character is driving the plot, but you're also what they do and how they behave with other people is illuminating both the character but also driving the story forward. So to me, that just felt like the right place to start that story there, because straight away we're given, like, we know what it's about, we're given the premise, we're given all the essential bits of information, but like you say, there's also stuff in there about the character and about their relationship, and it's just, you kind of, I suppose you're just like working it in just sort of subtly, and it's a balance in that for sure.
And as I was saying just now, like a lot of the balancing act has to do with, like you said, like the character and the plot have to be kind of like ingrained into each other. Like there's no time, especially for a short film, there's no time for great exposition. So I was gonna talk about the acting later, but from what you're saying, like I'm thinking about it, I think we should actually really start with the casting, because like these characters don't work without the performances, and they don't work without the performance, because so much of who Liam is in particular comes through in the way that Alan plays him. So talk about casting Alan and even Jade with Kimberly Okoye, and because like they start the entire film off, like, because everything that happens afterwards with Marcus is like there's something where she tells him basically, like, don't fuck this up. And like you can tell every decision that he makes after that is because he's keeping what she said in mind the entire time. He's thinking, don't mess this up, you can't mess this
exactly.
up. We talk about like just like the casting for them, because like that's so important with this particular story.
For sure. So Alan is a friend of a friend. I didn't know him like too well actually before we worked together on this, but he was part of quite a successful like comedy show here in the UK called People Just Do Nothing, and I just loved the show. And I had this one, when I started to write the script, I sent it to my friend who was the kind of intermediary between us, and like quite early on he was just really keen to do it, and we sat down and had a coffee and just spoke about some of the ideas, and the script was quite a lot different to the final script, but just he was he was just very keen to be on board. So Alan was the first kind of actor who came on board, and then I worked with a really great casting director called Louise Collins Casting. She and she found everyone else essentially. So I suppose in some way, because I already had Alan, it was quite not easy, but there was there's something to work from in terms of the casting. So with Alan there, I think Louise, obviously very like talented casting director, found Kimberly, and just straight from the off, really you got a sense that they would just kind of work together. And I think casting is an underrated art. I think like it's so important, and when you work with a casting director and they send you someone through, and it's just like you just get that sense straight away, and it's kind of it's a mysterious kind of beautiful thing when it comes off.
No, it's like casting is, as you said, an unappreciated art, because, and you know what, the Oscars really do need to have a category for best casting and best casting director, simply for BAFTA all these major awards. A film, like a director, yes, you have the story, you have the cinematography, you have the score, you have the characters, but it doesn't work unless the casting is done right. And the casting can only really be done right is if the casting director knows and has a person in mind there, say, okay, this is who I envision to play this scene, and this is who I envision to work with these other people. And it's a magic trick, because like they have to be able to like I think intuitively know what you as a director and the writer want, but then also have to be able to, I think also to me, think about what the performers will do within these performances. They have to envision these people playing these parts. And they really know.
That's it. It is amazing. And like I think for me as well, when I'm working with actors and when I'm talking to actors about roles, it's like it's trying to get a sense of like who they are as a person, because that's who they're bringing to this. Obviously they're artists and they're creating something, but it's like, yeah, it's a very like you say, kind of a magic trick for sure. Yeah,
it is. And they deserve better. But but going from that with the talking about the performances. So for Liam, he's one of those characters where you feel for him, and a lot of that has to do again with Allan's performance. And like when I was watching this, because I watched it like maybe 4 or 5 times already. When I was watching it, I just kept thinking like, yes, he's a criminal. He's a felon, and that's obvious because he's wearing the ankle monitor. But then you can also tell that he's a father who's trying to do his best. And he's now learning what it means to be a father. And even in this short space of time, he's learning with the responsibility of being a father. You know, he's learning about the fear of being responsible for a small human being. I looking after children is terrifying. You're praying that nothing happens to them in the entire time that you're watching them. And so he has that fear, but then he's also worrying about disappointing Jade. You know, he has all of this, and then here comes Marcus, and Marcus is a character where I think something that I never really thought about it until I actually was watching this, is like where you have people who are drug addicts, like they're so dangerous. And they're dangerous in the sense that they pose a threat to help people, to the life that people are trying to rebuild. And in Liam's case, he's trying to rebuild this relationship with his daughter. He's trying to rebuild the stability of a relationship with Jade. But Marcus is like a whirlwind, and he's posing a very real danger to this life that Liam is trying to build. And he's also posing a danger to his freedom, because if anything goes wrong, Liam could end right back up in prison. So talk about that story, that part of the story, and like I think to me, Liam, Marcus is a metaphor for the challenges that people, especially people who are like or recovering drug addicts, and people who are trying to stay out of the prison system. Like Marcus is a threat to everything. So talk about that element of the story and developing Marcus.
Yeah, I suppose I wanted to explore, like, there is a sort of toxic relationship sometimes with people in particularly like addicts together. Like that part is kind of like the story is based on kind of real life, but also not, in the sense of like my dad was a heroin addict, and he had an ex-wife who was an addict as well. And it's just, I think that dynamic is, I mean, it's sort of sad, but also like from a dramatic standpoint, it's quite interesting to explore. And particularly with like two men as well, there's a sort of overusing this buzzword toxic here, but like there is this sort of there is this sort of like kind of darkness to like these male friendships sometimes, and particularly when they're addicts as well. And I kind of just wanted to explore that in a way, but also it does obviously give that narrative momentum to drive the story forward too. So it's kind of both of those things.
It is, and like you say, like you don't want to use the word toxic, but it is toxic. For one thing, drugs like heroin, like those kind of drugs are literally toxic substances, and they're corrosive. But in a metaphorical sense, like it is toxic, like what the toxicity of these drugs pose to their lives, both to Liam and to Marcus's, because we see like what can happen to people if they're not able to get out of that, like if they're not able to get out of the toxicity of addiction, whereas Liam is showing the possibilities of that, of the people who make that determination. I'm going to do everything I can to stay clean. I'm going to do everything I can to change my life around. So like it's like there's the balancing. That's also another balancing act in the film as well, because it's showing like both the light and the dark side, and the possibilities of becoming a recovering addict, and then for those who are unfortunately unable to come out of that addiction.
That's it. And I think it's kind of common for addicts to say, to when you get to like different stages of addiction, like for my dad, he was addicted for like 10, 20, maybe even 30 years. So like when you're at that level, it really takes a lot to not be an addict, because it's your world at that point, it's everything. And like a lot of people will say, you have to leave people behind, you have to leave friends who are addicts behind you. Like you can't be sober and clean and be friends with that person, because it's too inherent in those relationships. So that's part of it as well.
Yeah, because that's the struggle that Liam has, because when Marcus turns up, he has Sophia there, and in my head, I'm thinking, dude, why are you letting this man in your house? You know,
Yeah.
but there is this, but like you can tell he's thinking of who he was as an addict and who he was as a friend in that circumstance with Marcus, because that lets him drop his guard down when he shouldn't have, and leads him to make a very bad decision that could have ended things for him in a very bad way. And like I was watching, and I'm like, why are you letting this man who's clearly in withdrawal symptoms in your house and around your child? And that just also, I think, brings home the fact that Liam has no idea how to be a parent, because like if he had the experience like of being a parent, he would know the safety of your child is your first priority.
Right? But I think for me as well, like when I was writing it, I was kind of thinking like you were saying at the start, he's like very unsure, and like, you know, it, like you said, he was humble, you know, when he's talking to Jade, to Kimberly, and like there's a sort of humbleness and there's a sheepishness, and you kind of get, you know, he looks vulnerable. And I feel like when Marcus comes along, it's, you know, he's kind of like, I don't know, there's something there that he doesn't want to give up. And like, particularly, you know, they have a bit of like banter when they're on the balcony, and I think, yeah, there is a moment of weakness, but it's also like, you know, he's vulnerable, and there's this person that's turned up, and there's something there with this friend that they had before. And like, I think that's part of it. That was kind of tough writing it, trying to think, you know, why would he invite this person in? But
fatigue of all things.
yeah, exactly. But I think it's, he wants to give up this life, but he was also still clinging on to it in a sense. And, you know, I kind of thinking about it now, you know, maybe he's lonely, you know, like there's that as well.
Yeah, because I got the sense that this is the first time that he's had anyone come to him since. Like I get the sense that he's fresh out of prison, like maybe within the same week. So this is the first interaction he's had with someone outside of prison that isn't connected to like the prison system.
Yeah, that's it. And it's tough because, you know, people make rational decisions all the time, and sometimes in a script or a film, and it doesn't feel true. It obviously like stands out a lot. So it's about giving those irrational decisions enough of like an emotional kind of motivation to feel real.
Right. And like you're saying something, and is something I just clicked in my head. So like we were talking about, the film kind of is talking about basically like balances, and I think it also talks about duality as well, because like speaking about Jade, like she starts out in the conversation with Liam. They like, you know, they kind of start out the same like easygoing way, you know, like catching up, like, how are you doing? Is like school going good? You know, I'm like catching up with school and all this. And then she like switches a flip, and she's like, don't mess this shit up, you know, like once she starts talking about the responsibility of being a parent, she flips a switch, and she's just like, I'm not messing with you. Like, this is not conversation. You have a responsibility. You can't mess this up. And Marcus kind of does, and Marcus also has the duality where, and it kind of made me think of like how drug addicts are so good at manipulating people and weaseling people and weaseling their way into spaces and ingratiating themselves to people, because their ultimate goal is to get the drug, is to get high, and they're going to do what they have to. And like Marcus' case, he starts out the same way, congenial, and he very like, you know, does the same easygoing conversation with Marcus, and like they're catching up, like they're best buddies from school. And then once he realizes he can't get what he wants from Liam, he flips a switch too, and he becomes like, super aggressive and violent in his speech and his mannerisms. And then even for Liam, he does the same thing too. Like in the beginning, he's like humble, his body posture is kind of reserved and unsure and insecure. But then once he realizes like, oh shit, like I messed up and I need to fix this situation now, especially because he has Sophia to think about. He also flips the switch with Marcus, and and we can see the person he was before, you know, like he was aggressive, and he can be physically violent if he needs to be. So talk about that aspect of the film, because I think it's interesting that all three of these characters are like they're able to flip a switch. And also that's also, I gotta praise the actors for that, because all three of them do such a fantastic job of switching modes in very short instances.
That's it. I don't know. You know, for me, that's just people. You know, people are complex, and people have hidden depths, and depending on what situation you're in, different aspects of your personality can come to the fore. And like, yeah, particularly what you were saying about Marcus, you know, like drug addicts, particularly, you know, with very addictive drugs like crack and heroin, you know, you just got to get high because it's otherwise you're sick, you know what I mean? And like, yeah, that like manipulative, and you kind of, he does kind of, definitely manipulates Liam, and Liam's kind of drawn into it a little bit. And like, I think I just want to write like complex characters, you know. To me, they feel more real, they're more interesting to watch on screen, and like it just lent itself to the story that I was trying to tell. But I'm really glad you say that, because like all the actors were just completely nailed those facets of the character.
Right. And you mentioned like some aspects of the film are based on like your own experiences as a child growing up with a father who was addicted to drugs. So when you were writing a script like this, like you said, like the finished script, it was in your original version. So, but when you're writing a story like this and does deal with a topic where you have to like kind of like process your emotions, or maybe even distance yourself from them because you don't want to make it too much. It's not a biography, you know. It's not. You're not writing your life story, but you're still drawing inspiration from your life. Like as a writer, how are you able to like adding the emotional elements that from your experiences help you to like relate to these characters and help you make the story more realistic, but then also back off and say, this is not an autobiography. This is not about me exposing my heart and my guts to like the audiences. Like that would be a different story. That would be that's another film. That's another story. But like, how do you also balance the inspiration from the reality?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like they're not my memories, but they're like, well, I suppose they are my memories, sorry, but they're not my experiences, sorry, is what I meant to say. Like they're things that happen. It's like family history, and it's kind of, for me, it's a bit confusing because like my mum, to protect us from that relationship, we didn't really speak a lot about it. And so for me, like I kind of grew up like, you know, filling in the gaps, and I was quite unsure about like what that relationship was and what my family history even was, and what my dad's history even was. It's only as I got older that I really understood. So it's you know, I was reading an interview actually with Charlotte Wells, who did the After Sun. I haven't seen it actually, but she was saying, you know, it's like there's an uneasy kind of dichotomy between like how much you're inspired by it, but also it's a fiction. Do you know what I mean? You're creating something. So for me, like I use these kind of like this family history as a way in, but like you say, it's not a document. I'm not trying to like represent anything. It's like I'm a filmmaker and I want to make a film, so obviously I'm going to use stuff that's like personal to me. But to me, that's just what art is. Do you know what I mean? You're sort of taking something that's in you and like creating something new with it to share with people, and that's so it is. But it is exactly like you say. It is a real like you're sort of processing things, and sometimes there can be a tendency to like maybe like be a little bit over introspective, but you've got to remember that you're telling a story, and like it's weird. It's kind of difficult to explain because it's a difficult thing to like navigate when you're doing it. It's a weird, like you say, distancing and getting close to your emotions without being too autobiographical about it.
I imagine it can be like kind of tricky. And I've seen After Sun. That's one of those films I think I need to rewatch it, because I was watching, I'm like, what is this film about? But that's not that it's bad. It's just like I think sometimes there's specific films like if you're in a particular frame of mind, like you kind of like miss what it's about.
Resonate. Sounds like it sounds like quite mysterious. Quite a mysterious film in a sense. I need to see it, to be honest.
It's an interesting film because it's about this father and daughter, and they're on a vacation. I think it's in somewhere in Greece, I think possibly. But it's just like it's interesting. Like it has like really good cinematography, and like I think I just need to rewatch it. But see what you think about it. But let me talk a bit about the writing, not for the directing of these scenes. Like this film takes place mostly in one location, and that's in Liam's house, and that's partly because like I assume because he has an ankle bracelet, the ankle monitor, so he can't go very far from his home. So everything starts out like it starts on the balcony, and then it goes into his house, and we get his space. And then like the only exterior shot we have is like when he has to go and find Marcus to get this bag this IKEA, I love IKEA bags. They're so versatile.
Yeah.
Let's go and get this IKEA bag with stuff in it, which is one of them is Sophia's bunny. And that's his main objective, is to get this stuffed bunny back. But like, talk about the directing of the film and like just the location of where you filmed and how you worked around the challenges of that location, because it's kind of like a small confined space.
Yeah.
Like the balcony, I think, was interesting because it's a narrow space and it's long, and you have to get all of these different shots from different angles to show the characters' faces. And then in the house, that's also a small space too. So talk about the challenges of directing that and like why you picked the locations you picked.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like you're thinking of that stuff when you're writing the script, and like for me, like money wise, it's like you're constantly always having to think about like what's achievable within the resources that I've got. So it's like those. Yeah, it's not like you kind of write something and then you're chopping and changing it, and it's kind of like from the very beginning you're sort of working. It's hard because you have to think practically, but obviously, creative thinking isn't practical a lot of the time. It's just like free flowing. So it's kind of like you have to, you have to be practical. For me, like I produce with someone, but I'm quite I'm kind of like the lead producer. So it's like I'm doing all the locations and like the financing and stuff. So, and I did that on my last two shorts. So when I came into this one, from the very beginning, I was thinking, right, I need this to be like not many locations. The flat that we shot in was actually a friend of mine's. The house that we shot in was the house that I was renting at the time. So it's like from the beginning, you're really just thinking like, how can you tell this story with the resources that you got? So it's more of a practical consideration, but the creativity comes, those limitations are what feeds the creativity in a way. But yeah, difficult to like, particularly the kitchen. I mean, it works quite well in the end because it's like a claustrophobic scene and it's quite tense. So like the kind of closeness and the, sometimes the face kind of obscures the camera. And for me, like, it kind of works with the scene because it's quite I just feel like it adds to the sort of claustrophobia of the scene, and probably what the characters are feeling as well. But yeah, it's difficult. And yeah, the scene at my house was a bit easier. We had a bit more space, but like, yeah, I was just worried about breaking something because it was like we were just about to move out and I didn't want to get my landlord to like give me a big fight. In fact, the scene, where you kind of like pushes them against the wall, we had to do that like 4 or 5 times. I was sat in the bathroom, which is just the opposite side, and he kept pushing him. And I was thinking, if he does this like 2 more times, I swear to God, that wall's going to go. It wasn't like it was a what's it called? It wasn't like a supporting wall. Do you know what I mean? That wall. So yeah, it was tricky. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, guys, please, I need to get my security deposit.
I wasn't. I was just like, do it harder. I'll worry about it after. No, but
you're like, it will make the scene truly authentic, and then you're like,
I have to
do it
through the wall. Yeah, too authentic. So yeah, it's tricky, but yeah, it's kind of part of the thinking, like when you're developing it. So it's yeah.
Right. So we've talked a bit about the adults. So I'll talk a bit about directing children, because Sophia, she's about 7, 8. So is this your first time directing a child actor?
Yeah.
Right. So like, what was it like for you having to direct not only a child actor and like working with a child character, but in a story like this? Because like, as I say, for me, like when I was watching this, my concern was Sophia, because I was just like, why are this skeevy man around your child? But like, that's about that. They said that's about how where Liam is mentally. Like, he's now learning to adjust to being a father. But as a director, you still have to like think about what the story is and like how this story relates to a child, because like as a child, she doesn't fully understand what's happening around her. But for the adults who realize this situation is very dangerous. So like for you, like writing that part of the story, but then also directing and directing that character. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because like heroin addiction and children just seems completely like it shouldn't be anywhere near each other. So and yeah, like working with Savannah, who's just like an amazing child actor. She's just like so talented. Her her mum was like so supportive as well, so that made a huge difference. She was with us on the day. And also like we did a rehearsal, but like we rehearsed a couple of scenes, but for me it's like I just want to have people in the same space before we go into the shoot just to like feel connected on a kind of human level, you know, and like there's always trust is a huge part of filmmaking, I think. But yeah, working with Savannah, she's just so good. She was just so talented. Like, just it was like mind blowing to me. I was kind of in awe of her, but I didn't want to be too like I was almost like didn't want to be too sycophantic kind of thing. But she was just so good to work with, and like her mum was so supportive, and like it was, yeah, I wanted to protect her because it's like it's not something a child really needs to learn know about at that age, you know. It's like it's not something that so yeah, it was just amazing. It was such a great experience to work with her. You know, there's something about having a child on set as well, just really just helps lift people, and yeah, it was just great. I'd like to work with kids again, to be honest. It was a really great experience.
Yeah, because like having it like for kids, like you got to be able to like keep the atmosphere more light, because like you have to make sure like they don't feel like brought down by the story, and like even if like for instance like if a film is like traumatic or whatever, like you have to make sure that you protect their psyche in a way, and make sure that they're not being directly affected by the story itself.
Yeah, that's it. But you know, that's where you work with really talented artists and technicians who, you know, like will shoot a really intense scene and then it ends and you're just having banter and like joking around, and it's like it's just, you know, it's working with such talented people who you know, when you say action, that's it, you're working, and that creativity kind of comes out. But you know, when the camera's not rolling, you're just a bunch of people just hanging out, really, like we're trying to, you know, working together. So and yeah, she was just so great. Yeah. And yeah, she got really upset when the film was ended because she had such a good time. She like cried, and it was just like the most like, yeah, just wonderful thing.
That's why I love kids. They're so resilient.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's true. And in fact, it's like on a serious point, like kids are really resilient and very insightful, and like, you know, I have a respect for her. Like she's a young child, but I'm like, you know, she's got her own thoughts and her own feelings and her own her own ideas. So it's like I just try and, you know, it's like there's a respect there as well, to be honest.
Right. They're very insightful. Like, I've worked with kids before I was before. Well, when I started my work as a film critic, I was working at a public school, and I worked with kindergartners and middle schoolers, and like kids say some of the most intuitive and insightful things, and they pick up on. I always tell people, kids never underestimate a child, because they see way more.
That's it. And you know, as an artist, you want to be that. You need that inner child, is that curiosity, that insightfulness. That's, you know, you've got to kind of nurture that. So yeah.
Yeah, you do. I love kids. They terrify me.
Yeah,
I love them.
yeah. Same. Yeah.
So for the film, the film, as we said, is set in one day, and is set within like a very short space of time, like maybe 1 hour or 2 hours. But for how long was the filming for this actually?
So well, it's actually set over 24 hours actually. So it's like, yeah. So it's like, well, it's like one day. So she drops her off in the morning, and then the next day she collects her. So the kind of action takes place.
But most of everything takes place within like the first. Quite a short,
yeah. It takes place within like a day, and then there's like he puts her to bed, and then she comes to pick her up. So, but it was a 3-day shoot.
That's quick.
Yeah, it's quick. I mean, it's the financial constraints. You need to be so economical, and like you got to plan everything, you know, really, really plan. And I'm working with the crew who are like taking a bit of a pay cut to work with me. So I'm just, you know, you want to make things just as easy and as kind of efficient as possible. So yeah, it's funny, you talk about, you show people films and people think you're shooting for like days on end, you know, and it's just like, it's not like that.
Yeah, no, sometimes I think sometimes you can get the best stories in like the shortest space of time. There's like a film that we interviewed the lead actress called The Inspection with Jeremy Pope. And when you watch this film, you think this film takes like, they had like maybe like 2-3 months to film this film. They did not. They filmed this entire film in 19 days. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing what you can do with like a good team and good production and good planning. It's all that stuff has to support the filmmaking. Well, it is the filmmaking, you know, that is filmmaking, like producing and doing a shot list, doing a schedule, that's filmmaking. It's all part of the process.
Right. That's true, because I think for a lot of people, they think just filmmaking is just taking the camera, calling action, filming the scenes and cut, and that's it. But there's so much planning that goes on before. Then there's the planning that happens during. Like, you have to be adapt. I think one of the most underrated aspects of filmmaking, especially for directors and for actors and crew, is you have to be adaptable. You know, you got to be able to adjust like on the fly. If something doesn't quite work, you got to be able to say, okay, wait, this isn't working. Let's try this again. And work around whatever new obstacles or challenges are, even if you realize this, like when you have it on paper, what you envision on paper isn't the reality, and you have to be able to, this is what I think, this is where I want this story to go. So I think that's something, especially for short films, again, like we're talking, like you have to think about financial constraints and time constraints, and be respectful of the time that everyone has to dedicate to this, because for many short films, especially for independent filmmakers like yourself, you don't have a huge budget, you don't have like a big studio backing you, so you have to be very aware of the kind of like the sacrifices that people are making to be able to work with you.
I'm glad you say that, because I live in London, and I'm sort of blessed with, like, there's a lot of film industry, and just so I've done a few short films, and like the first thing I kind of feel after is just such admiration for the crew. You know, they work such long hours, and I think there's a bit of a shift going on at the moment where they're starting to ask for a little bit more from the studios and stuff. But like, just in awe of them, like, man, they just work so hard. They're so professional. They're so dedicated. And that's, they make the film. The film wouldn't exist without the crew. So yeah, just props to the crew. Yeah.
No, for true. I always have respect for crew, and I always try to show my appreciation, because once the actors have gone home, it's the crew that have to take everything down and start, like, take the sets down, and then set stuff up for the next shot or for the next day. And they're the ones that are like left before, they're the last ones to turn the lights off. So props.
For sure. That's shout out.
And especially for like short films, like, you really wouldn't be able to, especially when you have really small budgets. You also have to, like, when you have crew who know what they're doing, who are so professional, and like not professional as in like a work ethic, but who know the business, who know filmmaking, like, they have to know the art of filmmaking itself. And like for you as a director, I think, like you said, you started out doing photography, and like you even took acting courses, and I think that's so important for directors, like, because it gives you a more well-rounded experience of the craft itself, and being able to understand it from different perspectives.
That's it. And that's exactly it. But also, just watching movies, and I feel like, with the crew, they believe in your vision. They're like, they have an emotional connection to that idea as well. And it's when you work with them, and they're artists as well, and they're bringing their own kind of thing into it, and that's what the film ends up being. It's just a celebration of collaboration more than anything.
No, it really is. So I think that's it, because it's 45 minutes, and I promised you 45 minutes. But this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for talking with me, Harry. I think this film, I'm always one of the things I love about doing my job, and I say this all the time, but I mean it. But I always take great joy in, like, when I start a film, like, and I read the synopsis, but then sometimes you get to know, you really, really get a sense of the film, and even the filmmakers from the films, because some synopsis, as well as they're written, don't really tell you, they don't really prepare you for the story, or even for the acting and the development of everything. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me about this film, because it made me think about things that I never really thought about before. And also about the challenges of creating short films, and especially for stories like this, because like, I think for me, filmmaking is a way of learning more about the world as well, and learning more about art. And like, no matter how many years, I'm 39, I've been watching films my entire life, but I still don't know everything about filmmaking. I still haven't seen every, like, iteration of any possible story. I haven't seen every type of performance. So I appreciate you for talking to me about this and for making this film, because it's made me think about things differently.
Oh, no, it's all. Thank you so much. It's been really wonderful talking to you, and thank you for the support, and thank you for having me.
So everyone, that was another episode of Carolyn Talks. And in this episode, I spoke with filmmaker Harry Brandrick about his short film, The Alt, which showed at various London and international film festivals this year. And as you mentioned, at the end, it will be showing at another film festival in January. And I'll provide the links and details for that in the description box for the podcast post as well as YouTube post as well. And I really appreciate Harry taking the time for speaking to me. I always have a blast talking filmmakers. I just love learning more about filmmaking from the perspective of creatives and from the perspective of the people who come up with these stories out of thin air. That always fascinates me. You start with a story on paper, and then you get all these people together to make this and bring this story to life. So that's always one of the things that always fascinates me about film. And this film, I think, is like, I love that it's unexpectedly about dualities, and it's about dichotomies in like people's relationships and also people's personalities and experiences, which again, unexpected when I started watching this film. But I was like, at the end, I was like, what? Look at all of these themes. I really appreciate it. So I appreciate Harry again taking the time to speak with me. I appreciate all the work that actors and the crew and everyone who worked with him put in to make this film. And you can find other episodes of Carolyn Talks as on my podcast channel. So that will be on Acast if you're listening to Acast, on Google Podcasts, as well as on butwhythough.net. You'll find links there. You'll find links on my Authory page. That's authroy.com/Carolyn Hines. You can find links to the podcast there, to the YouTube channel there, and to all of my published writing, interviews, reviews, film analysis, and the like. You can go on my YouTube channel. So that'll be youtube.com/@Carolyn_Hines for the video versions of my interviews for Carolyn Talks, as well as for the Africa virtual roundtables. And I haven't done it in a while, but for Beyond the Romance, which is my Asian drama podcast channel, I will be restarting that in 2023, because I took an unofficial hiatus for a while because I needed to start stuff out. But I missed doing it, so I'll be doing that again. And everyone, until the next episode of Carolyn Talks, stay safe. Oh, wait. And you can, as usual, find me on Instagram and Twitter at CarrieCNH. That's CarrieCNH12. Tweeting about my stuff. You can go to my pinned tweets for links to my latest published work, and my Instagram page, you'll find links to the interviews and everything that I do there as well. I think that's it. So until the next episode of Carolyn Talks, everyone, stay safe.